Welcome back. We're with Congressman Schock, who was pretty outspoken during the recent situation involving America's debt ceiling. Congressman, give us your thoughts about that situation and what's the likelihood it's just going to keep coming back again and again?
Well, a couple of things, Paul. This was the first time in our country's 200-year history when the Congress voted to raise the debt limit, where there was requisite cuts required as a part of the debt limit. Our country has raised its debt limit over 100 times in its 200-year history. Most notably, our increases in debt limit have occurred when we're at times of war, when it was World War I, World War II, Vietnam, during the Cold War. These were times where the American people went along with the idea we should borrow, we should go into debt to keep America secure and safe and keep our freedoms for the next generation. The difference today is we're now borrowing not to stay as a free nation, but we're actually borrowing for day-to-day operating expenses. We're actually borrowing for the current generation of Americans' consumption. It's kind of like borrowing for your ongoing personal expenses to pay the grocery bill or whatever, as opposed to borrowing to buy a car or to buy a house. Why is that relevant? Well, it's because it's not a sustainable accumulation of a debt. 40 cents out of every dollar that we spend right now is borrowed from other countries, foreign investors who loan the federal government money. So if you think about it in your own terms, 40 cents out of every dollar we spend is borrowed. So having said that, many of us believe that the only way we would get the president to come to terms with necessary cuts is to use the debt limit vote as a leverage point to get necessary cuts to try and bring down our debt load. As you know, it was not a pretty process. Both sides went back and forth, but both sides are very opinionated in their view. Obviously, the president in January started out saying he wanted a clean debt limit, meaning no cuts, and we said we want $4 or $5 trillion in cuts, and we settled on $2.5 trillion in cuts for a $2.5 trillion debt limit increase. That's the good news. The bad news is, even with that debate, even with that battle that ensued, and even with the $2.5 trillion in cuts, which will happen, we haven't fixed the problem. And it's why S&P has downgraded us. It's why many in the business community here in our country, as well as foreign, look at our government and say, these guys aren't serious about fixing the problem. Because we still are borrowing $1 trillion this year more than we're taking in revenues. That has to change. And the only way you change that is through entitlement reform. Well, why is that? Because while 40 cents out of our dollar is borrowed, 65 cents out of our dollar today goes just to support Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So just to support entitlement programs. So you can't cut spending big enough, even if you got rid of the military, even if you didn't spend any money on transportation. If you want to keep current beneficiaries on Social Security, Medicare, which nobody wants to cut,
right.
If you want to keep them in place, you need 65 cents of the dollar, and you only have 60 cents. So needless to say, it's why many of us on the Republican side are saying, Mr. President, if you're serious about dealing with the debt, stop talking about tax increases, stop talking about cutting Pell Grants or cutting transportation funding. We have to do entitlement reform. At the end of the day, the only way we fix this is if my generation of American realizes today, not in 20 years, that Social Security and Medicare as we know it today is going to be different for the next generation of Americans. We can do it while preserving the benefits for people that are 55 years of age or older. In other words, people who are currently on Social Security or Medicare or who are 10 years away from retirement. We can keep those people whole in the current system, but also make minor changes to the programs for people under the age of 55 so that they're solvent. Because the simple fact is there are fewer and fewer Americans being born, and our population is living longer and longer because of great advances in medicine and quality of life here in our country. And so there won't be enough workers paying into the current Social Security and Medicare system as they're designed to keep all of our growing senior population afloat.
Recently, Doug Oberhelman, the chairman of Caterpillar, criticized Congress. He said that honesty is lacking in Washington and that there's not enough open discussion with the public.
Sure.
Quickly, do you agree or disagree?
Well, I would agree. I mean, what's frustrating for me is when we talk about dealing with our debt, and the president says he wants to deal with the debt, but yet he won't deal with entitlements. As I just outlined a few minutes ago, you can't deal with the debt if you don't deal with entitlements. Now, even if you think we should raise taxes, okay, even in a down economy, if you want to raise taxes, you can't fix this problem just through tax increases. Let me give you a statistic. If you took 100% of every household in America that made over $250,000, those are the guys the president likes to demonize, the rich. If we took 100% of their earnings, not 10% more or 50%, 100%, every dollar over 250 grand of every person in this country, we wouldn't have enough to cover the $1.6 trillion debt. So to say that somehow we're going to solve this by raising revenue without solving the spending problem, without solving the entitlement problems, is exactly right. It's not honest. And so we have to be, and for too long, Paul, I would say elected officials haven't been honest. You know, when I was growing up, politicians come back from Washington, D.C., and what do they say? We just need to get rid of some of that waste and fraud in D.C. We need to cut Congress's salary. We need to get rid of the foreign aid budget, all that money we give to other countries. And while all of those may be good ideas in and of themselves, the reality is you can't fix the spending problem just by doing those things. When 65% of your dollar goes to support entitlement programs, and in 2045, the year 2045, it will consume 100% of our dollar, you can't be honest about dealing with the debt if you don't take on those entitlement programs.
We have to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to ask Congressman Schock about the upcoming election season. But first, here is the Peorian's own literary and culinary guy, Kevin Kizer.
Hi, I'm Kevin Kizer, the literary and culinary guy at the Peorian. So this week I want to talk about some of the things we're doing on the website. For example, something we're calling litter lists. Now, litter lists will cover a wide range of literary topics and generally be focused on things we like, although there may be the occasional list of things we hate. Each list will grow over time with periodic additions being made, some based on reader feedback. So if our litter list gives you a litter thought, send us a litter note or make a litter comment. Okay, I'll stop that. Our first two litter lists are up right now. One is called Good Novels That Turned Into Pretty Good Films. The first novel turned into a pretty good film is Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kizer of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest fame, and it stars Paul Newman and Peter Fonda. The second movie is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, starring Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro. Our second litter list is called Writers Who Have Made Cameo Appearances in Films, and that includes people like Marshall McLuhan in Annie Hall, Kurt Vonnegut in Back to School, and William S. Burroughs in a wonderfully creepy role as a junkie priest and drugstore cowboy opposite Matt Dillon. We've already had some great reader feedback on some of these topics, so go visit thepeorian.com and check out the litter area. Now, on the culinary side of things, our schedule for Kizer Party 4 is really filling up quickly, with both restaurants and diners. If there's a restaurant you would like us to preview, or if you want to be one of the 3 diners that joins me for a Kizer Party 4, send me an email, kevin@adcoagency.com, or post a comment on the website. Well, that's about it for the literary and culinary side of things. And now, commercial time, commercial time, commercial